the fifth kind.
Paul, I had always felt, even in childhood, that we have others that are here to assist us. I was laughed at, saying that I made it up, thereby having to go to confession for it. This made me question religion.
Well, CJ, I'm so sorry you had to go to confession for that, because what you were experiencing is something that people experience all around the world. And if you had simply grown up in another country where you have shamanic traditions or traditional healers, you would have had people around you who would have told you, CJ, you're absolutely sound, you're absolutely sane. This is true. This is an experience we all have. Yes, we do have helpers there to assist our progress through life. When I first started hearing this, it was, I suppose, from people that we might call sensitives or psychics. And I was hearing this as a Christian pastor and thinking, well, are they experiencing God? Is this the Holy Spirit? Is this angels? And I was trying to process it through this grid of Christian theology. And what I didn't know is that there are some aspects of Christian theology that were live in the beginning, at the beginning of the Christian story, but which got lost, which didn't get preached on, which had been neglected. And two examples of this would be Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2, which speaks about our spiritual ancestors surrounding us. There's this passage that describes all these amazing spiritual ancestors and their exploits and how great they were. And then the writer says, therefore, since we are surrounded, he doesn't say preceded, he says, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of, he doesn't say predecessors, he says witnesses. That's people watching us. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And so he gives this picture of each one of us having our ancestors looking at us, hopefully wanting to support us in our progress through life, wanting to encourage us to excel, almost as if they're looking and saying, okay, what are you going to do with our DNA? And they wish us well. And that picture is something that is believed in very strongly. If you go to a Nanga or a Sangoma in Southern Africa, if you've gone there for advice or for healing, they believe that's very real. The traditional healer will expect to tune in to messages from your ancestors or the spirits of your ancestors to support you in your healing or in your decision making. And I had no idea until I revisited these texts in the last few years. That's there in primitive Christianity as well. And then there's another really interesting verse in the New Testament, 1 John 4, where the writer clearly expects the early Christians to be having contact experiences with spirits. And he never defines what he means by spirits. Does he mean the spirits of ancestors? Does he mean energy-based beings? In some cultures, the word spirit just means a being or a person who can materialize in your room or on your property, and you don't know how they got there. And then they disappear by some means that you don't understand. In some cultures, if a being has advanced transportation that can get them from the sky to the earth, they'll be called a spirit. Well, the writer of 1 John 4 doesn't tell us which of those he means, simply that he expects people to be having encounter experiences with mysterious beings and that people can expect to derive good information from them. But he insists we should keep our sovereignty. It's not a matter of believing every voice you hear or doing everything that you think some voice has told you to do. We're sovereign beings. So whatever you think you're hearing, you have to weigh up, does that make sense to me? Do I need to do anything about that? You are in charge of yourself, and that's what the writer insists on. And I find that very, very sound advice. And when I talk to people of other spiritual traditions, I find it very interesting that, for instance, if I talk to a sensitive or a psychic or a consciousness worker or a light worker, they will often be a little bit vague as to how they get their insight and whose are the voices that are guiding them. And at one level, it doesn't matter too much as long as they're weighing everything up and asking, does that make sense? Do I need to repeat that? Do I need to do anything about that? And that's the worldview I've come to. It's really been anchored for me through my work as a pastor and a coach. I, from time to time, will find myself coaching somebody, and I'll say, do you know what? I'm coming to believe that every one of us has an invisible team of helpers around us whose job is to support us and assist us through life. I have yet to say that and not have the other person say, I'm coming to believe that too. But it's not because they've been taught it. In fact, they might have had to have gone to confession for it as well. They're coming to believe it because they are experiencing it, and they are trying to get their head around these little coincidences, these random thoughts, these thoughts that seem to come from outside their own thinking that have helped them and supported them. And so I find it interesting that it's not something that's taught in school, in church, in Western culture, and yet people are experiencing it every bit as much as people who've grown up in Southern Africa, having been mentored by a shaman, or they've done traditional initiation. So I think it's a profoundly human experience. I think it's a universal experience. And I think it's a wonderful experience when we learn to tune into it.
Click on the links in the description to watch the full video.